All right, let's talk about something that every parent knows too well, and that is conflict. If you've got more than one child, you already know that World War III can break out over who touched the armrest, who got the bigger slice, who's touching who, or who looked at who sideways. And some days, I'm sure it feels like your only job is just being the referee in an ongoing WWE match in your living room. So today, we're going to be talking about teaching your child healthy conflict resolution. And if you have an only child, listen, don't tune out because this still matters to you. Even if there aren't sibling wars happening in your house, your child, they still need to learn how to handle conflict. All right? Now, it just happens somewhere else. It'll happen on the playground or in the classroom, or even later in life in friendships and even marriage. And so teaching your child healthy conflict resolution, it's not just good for their emotional and their spiritual maturity, but it's a skill that'll take them far in their life. And so what if we stopped trying to just break up the fight and actually started to try to train peace? What if we focused on training peace over just stopping the fight, the conflict? And those two things, they might sound like the same thing, but they're completely different things. Think about it like this. Stopping the fight is about behavior, okay? But training peace, that's all about the heart. But most of us, we settle for like, everybody stop it, or would you just leave each other alone? And listen, every parent with more than one child has said those things. But if we're always just trying to quiet the noise, we're actually missing a huge opportunity with our children. Because, and here's the weird thing, is that conflict is actually a great opportunity for teaching maturity in our child. Conflict's actually prime real estate for discipleship of our child. And it's prime real estate because it's a chance to teach self-control, to teach empathy. And it's excellent for teaching forgiveness and teaching respect, all in real time. But so often, we're just focused on squelching the behavior, right? We break up the fight and we think, well, at least they're quiet now. At least they're not fighting. But the question is, did they grow? Did they actually learn anything? Did their little hearts change in the process? Because remember, heart change is the goal of being a great parent. It's changing their heart. Because yeah, even though we want our child to behave and act right, that's just superficial behavior modification if their hearts actually never change. And if we're just dealing with behavior and not the heart, then we are actually peacekeeping and not peacemaking. And so then the question becomes, well, what's the difference, Micah? Like, what's the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking? Well, as it turns out, there's a huge difference. There's a big difference. Peacekeeping actually says, let's just avoid the conflict altogether. But peacemaking says, no, let's deal with the conflict, but in a healthy way. Because you see, we can't train peace by avoiding conflict. And some children, they avoid conflict by running from it, but others avoid conflict just by dominating everybody. If they're so loud and intimidating, then they never actually have to deal with the real conflict. But training peace doesn't come by avoiding conflict, and it doesn't happen by letting somebody just walk all over us. Peace happens when we deal with conflict, and not just deal with it, but actually deal with it in a healthy way, or teach them to deal with it in a healthy way. And dealing with conflict in a healthy way, it's become a lost art in our society. Because we got to have conversations. We have to coach our children on how not to run from it and how not to be the bully as well. And we have to take the opportunities to practice healthy conflict resolution and learn the sweet spot between getting walked on and being overly aggressive. We want to teach them to be peacemakers. So the question is, how do we teach our children to deal with conflict in a healthy way? Well, first of all, is we can't just tell them what not to do. Stop it. Don't do that. We have to actually walk them through what they should do. And so if there is conflict, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities, we start by asking questions. And the reason that we ask questions is to help them actually work through their emotions. And these are some great questions to start out with, like what happened? What were you feeling, right? How do you think that they felt in the middle of this conflict? And what do you think needs to happen in order to make it right? And these aren't for the purpose of guilt or punishment, but just to help them process what they're feeling and if those feelings are actually based on reality. Because so often, even adults, we don't learn to process our feelings in a healthy way because we don't ask ourselves questions like these. And so I want to pause here and I want to talk about us, the parents, for a moment. Because remember, we're going to reproduce who we are. So I'm going to deal with us for a minute, and then we'll swing back around to our kids. So when we get upset, so often we just know how we feel. We feel hurt, or we feel angry or offended or rejected. We just know how what you did makes me feel and how that makes me feel. But so often people never go back to actually look at what actually happened. Recently, a volunteer leader at the church wrote me an email about something that I did that they didn't like. And they didn't ask any questions about it. They just made accusations about why they thought that I did it. And let me tell you that when I read that, it made me hot. Not because they expressed their concerns, I was actually excited about that part of it, but it was because they assumed my motivation for what I did. And so that made me angry. And one thing that I've learned is to ask myself questions to really help me process things maturely, because I have emotions just like everybody else. I know how I feel right now, but I had to ask myself what actually happened. Because certain things that can trigger you to where you don't care what they actually said or did, you just care how you took it. And so going back to look at what actually happened or what they actually said, it helps us process our emotions more maturely. And it also keeps our foot out of our mouths as well. So I had to ask, like, what was actually said? And then, what am I feeling? And why did this bother me so much? And then I have to go around and look at it from their side. How are they feeling? And that gives me a mature 360-degree perspective. And then the question is, what needs to happen to make this right? And this helps me go back and learn how to handle those feelings maturely. And that helps me navigate the conflict with logic and maturity, as opposed to just uncontrolled, often illogical emotions. And so, I can't control my emotions, but I can keep them from actually controlling me and my behavior. And I know some of us were raised in households where emotions ruled, or maybe it was that nobody, controlled their emotions. Maybe it's that everybody stuffed their emotions. And we learn as children from how our parents deal with conflict. And that can be healthy or it can be unhealthy. But if we can make sure that we're not just trying to keep peace by dominating or by running, but we're actually trying to make peace by learning to process our emotions, then it can actually be a healthy exercise. And so that's how we coach our children through conflict. It's not just stop it, but it's actually helping to shape them. Conflict resolution is more than just teaching them to say, I'm sorry. And you've probably seen, the say you're sorry routine, right? Where, the child just kind of mumbles sorry with like zero eye contact, zero heart behind it, and that's not what I'm talking about. We need to teach them to say more than I'm sorry. Teach them to say, I'm sorry for, and then have them actually name the offense. And then have them explain why they were wrong. And that's going to make a difference if they actually have to articulate that. And then actually ask for forgiveness. Will you forgive me? You see, I'm sorry is expressing your sorrow for what you did wrong, but there's something so powerful in having to actually ask somebody to forgive you because it's humbling. And then an apology is not complete until we ask, how can I make it right? So maybe one sibling borrowed another sibling's shirt and they stained it. Well, they may have to use their birthday money to buy a new one. That's actually taking responsibility. But it was an accident. Well, yeah. And our character and our integrity says that we return things as good or better than we got them. And so what can we do to make it right? Maybe we replace it, and listen, kids without siblings, they often get less practice at handling conflict at home like this. So your job is to help them build those muscles in other ways. We only had one child, Josiah, so I had to teach him how to share, which meant sometimes I wanted to play with his toys, or how to lose gracefully, which means I didn't let him win at video games all the time. It meant that I had to teach him how to apologize when he was wrong and how to listen when somebody else had a different opinion. And so if you have a single child, you can create those growth moments in small ways. Maybe playing board games where they don't always win, or volunteering together where they have to cooperate with other people, or maybe even role playing how to respond when a friend says or does something hurtful. Because the goal, it's not just peace at home, it's raising a peacemaker in the world that they live in. So whether they have siblings or not, every child needs to learn how to resolve conflict in a healthy way, to show empathy, to make things right. And does that take time? Absolutely. Does it take lots of energy? Yes. And sometimes does it feel like overkill when you just want peace and quiet? Definitely. But the thing is we're not training for convenience. We're training for character in our children. And our homes, they can be training grounds for reconciliation and integrity and not just survival. What if we taught our children that conflict doesn't have to mean disconnection? And what if we actually modeled that with how we handle conflict as well? So here's the challenge this week. Don't just shut down the next conflict. Actually use it to train them. Step in with purpose and coach them. Slow it down. Take the time and train their heart. Because how they handle conflict, it's a training ground for how they'll handle marriage, work, life down the road. And if we can raise children who don't just win arguments, but know how to make peace, that's a legacy worth building.